Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Most churn does not happen suddenly. It forms quietly, long before a renewal actually occurs. And if we're able to see it earlier, we can change what it is we do about it. I'm Kelly Causey, and I lead customer success at Emburse. At Emburse, we deliver travel and expense intelligence solutions for our customers to help them move from reactive spend management to something more proactive and data-driven. As we have grown, the complexity of our customer base has also done the same. It is not just about saving accounts, it is about doing it predictably and efficiently. I needed better visibility, and that's where my partner, Vikas, comes in.
My name is Vikas Sharma, and I lead the digital CX intelligence. I know that's a mouthful, but me and my team are responsible for not only generating the intelligence and insight, but to put those into meaningful actions so that we can make a difference with customer sentiments. So while Kelly carries the operational pressure, we manage the systems and models behind that pressure. So this story is about what changed when these two aspects work together.
Today, we're going to walk through how we stopped reacting to churn and started seeing it earlier, what changed when we connected our data signals instead of just layering on another dashboard to pull up into view, where predictive insights reshaped our prioritization of customers, and how digital engagement helped us to scale without increasing risk. So for me and my teams, we were not unaware of churn. Churn is something that unfortunately is part of a business. Our problem was that we were late to it. The risk became visible at the point in which our customers were feeling an immense amount of friction. We weren't lacking data, we had plenty of data, but it lived in way too many places for us. And my team was spending a lot of time reacting instead of getting ahead of that risk. So churn rarely happens suddenly, but the visibility into it does. We came to a pretty simple conclusion at Emburse about a year ago. We could not afford surprises. So our philosophy internally in the CX organization is no surprises. If a customer is churning, it should not feel sudden to us. And that shifted how we started to think about retention as an organization. And I'll hand it over to Vikas to talk a little bit about what that means at scale.
Yeah, so at scale, prediction beats interpretation all the time, and system needs to surface those risks that the CSMs and the people would be otherwise looking for, right? So humans need to exist where the leverage exists, where the revenue is, where the customer retention is, not everywhere. So that required a different model for us, and that's what we did. So what we did was we moved from reactive to predictive. What it meant was, while reactive was looking at a point of time and what customer was feeling at that state, we wanted to model it for future, and we wanted some certainty, right? So our goal wasn't to really collect a lot of data. We had enough data, I must say. It was to get that certainty a bit earlier, and that's where predict came very handy for us. So before we move on to what we did and how we realized the value from predict, it's important to understand why traditional model fails. And there are two core reasons behind that. First is depicted in the image underneath what you can see there, where the health, although it can tell you what's the current state of the customer, it does not model the trajectory or the momentum of the customer. Where is that customer heading to, right? So that's the missing piece with health score, and that's what is not sufficient for us to take action with customers proactively. And secondly, all these great signals that we have NPS, we have health scores, we have these product signals. All these signals are great, but they live in dashboard, they live in reports where someone needs to go there, understand it, and take an action, right? And that model doesn't really work. So with predict, we were able to model that trajectory with the customer. So what did we do? We created a one unified customer journey. We took all these signals that we had. We had NPS, we had CES, usage, billing. We connected them all together. And what that allowed us to do was to take these intentional actions, right? So we started to change our question from asking how the customer is feeling right now or how healthy they are to a point where we were asking what is likely to happen next, right? And that state is continuously calibrating itself. So we have been feeding these signals on and in a kind of like a continuous form that allow us to understand customer state on an ongoing basis. So that's where like Predict comes into picture. So I would like to give you some idea about how we evaluated Predict. There were these 4 main considerations that we looked at, and we looked at Predict from a model decision perspective. What it meant was, we looked at the model performance. What it meant was, it's not about like the quality or the performance of the model, but how many predictors that you can actually use to build a model yourself. So for us, like we could build a model ourselves as well, but what Predict allow us to do is to connect to all the signals that comes out of Pendo and also our CRM or any other system for that sake. So that was one great point that Predict allowed us to achieve. Second was signal integrity meant was this is where the signals had to be very transparent, they had to be very clear, they had to kind of explain the picture of a customer clearly, and they had to be coherent across all our systems, coherent with health scores as well. And the last 2 around business alignment and CSM actionable, it meant that the predictions had to align to our existing CX plays and CSM's day-to-day. Right? So these were our core criteria how we evaluated Predict, and we got some great value, and I'm going to pass it to Kelly to talk about the value we got and are getting.
Yeah, so for us, Predict really allowed us to layer on intelligence on top of the customer journey. It helped us to really understand where an account is, but also where it's headed. It absolutely did not replace our health scoring. Health scoring is really a status of what's already happened in an account, but it allowed it to become actionable and give us a future idea about what may occur in the account if we don't intervene or what could occur if we do intervene. And as we scaled, I was spending a lot of time explaining the variance in our projections, answering the questions of why did this renewal surprise us? Why is this churn notice unknown? Why are we over-servicing some accounts and underserving others? So I spent a lot of time explaining instead of living in the strategy and having my teams execute that strategy. Without Predict, all of our accounts felt equally urgent. I shared in this morning's keynote that we were running customer success at a cost to serve of 3 to 4% ARR. And that effort was just figuring out who should I talk to, who should I respond to, who needs executive engagement. It was figuring out where to look and not who really needed the most action at that moment in time. Once we were able to begin trusting the model of Predict, our cost to serve dropped closer to 2% of ARR. And let me be clear, that's not because we worked less. It's really because we spent less time in the wrong places. The work did not shrink, but it became clear for our teams.
Yeah, so the good thing about Predict was that it existed where it should. You know, it existed along with all the other account information. So it existed in the account view. And what that allowed us to do was to, first of all, minimize our work in integrating all the signals together, but also help us to define those threshold triggers where we could say, you know, this has to be an alert that goes to like a digital motion with low risk, versus this is a high risk task that needs to go to a human, because that's where the leverage exists. Again, that's the key word, where the leverage exists.
So at the end of the day, it's one model that we've implemented, but it shows up in different ways depending on what is happening with our customers in the life cycle. If we see early risk, it allows us to step in sooner and protect that account. If we see that engagement and adoption are light, it allows us to jump in and help that customer see the value and begin adopting our products as we would like them to. And if the usage is strong, it also tells us that it may be a point in time for us to engage with the customer and have a conversation about growth. So it's not just about preventing churn. That certainly is a big part of my day, but it really is supporting the entire customer life cycle from start to finish. For us, it became clear that the health of a customer could not just live in a dashboard. If someone had to go log into a system and check what the health was, that was not going to work for us at scale. We needed it to be inside a workflow. And so instead of manually scanning accounts each and every day and trying to figure out who needed us most, those alerts surfaced when it mattered. Instead of guessing the next step of how I should help this customer or how I should intervene, the next step became clear. The system does the watching, and my team does the engaging with the customer. If intelligence is not changing what it is we do, then it just becomes noise.
Yeah, so at scale, the complexity increases, right? And we have to think in terms of scale because that's where the real value is. So what Predict allowed us to do was to do this kind of customer segmentation. We could easily say, like, this is a high-risk task and a human is needed. This is a medium-risk task. This could be done through an assisted digital experience. Or this is a low-risk task that can be completely automated, right? So that allowed us to increase our coverage, not depend on hiring per se, right? And that also helped us to reduce the chaos around customer experience in a very structured way. So as it's quite getting apparent that with disconnected signal, it seems like a noise, right? You need to do that manual stitching. You have to drive the late visibility, which is of most of the time of low value. But with connected intelligence is, again, the key word that we are trying to convey here. It helps us to model that probability, that certainty in future, right? And it allows us to also automate our work and effort in a structured way. It allows us to drive the intentional action which can maximize the value.
So how did it change the work for my teams? On the one side, you see this reactive working model, and that is truly how I felt probably about this point in time last year. A lot of firefighting, manual sorting of data, lots of escalations, a large book of business with the team unsure of who to focus on next. But the intentional work looks different for them. They have a focused attention, a book of business, data-backed prioritization of who needs them when, and their engagement can now become strategic instead of reactive. So Predict does not replace CSMs. It really is just making their work intentional and clear. So the future that we're building at Emburse is not about working harder. It really is removing the uncertainty, being clear, having visibility on our customers at any point in time, and understanding that trajectory earlier. That also allows us to make better decisions. And when that intelligence becomes connected and those data points become connected, the retention is predictable, not reactive. So at this point, we'd like to bring Kobe out on stage to join us for some fireside chat and questions.
Hey everyone, hey. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Great slides. And I think that the best part that it was fun to partner with you on this project, and I'm looking forward to what's next. Um, so to wrap us out, I just want to show one slide that kind of shows where we're going. So when we started Predict, actually it was Forward AI, my company, the goal was how can we make predictive models? How can we tell someone that an account is at risk, an account might have sell opportunity, cross-sell opportunity, etc. How can we identify that? Now, second, after we've done that, the goal is really how do we explain why? What was the reason for a customer to churn, to cross-sell, to upsell? And how can we make it in a way that's readable to everyone in the go-to-market team? Not only to customer success, but also to the people who owns the data, right? To understand why. Afterwards, we wanted to drive employees, and we wanted to drive action. We wanted to have the ability for us to guide our employees about what they need to do step by step, so we get a very distinct and specific service for our customers. That's every time the same thing. And lastly, in this agentic world, where we are going is actually not only recommend what you should do next, but also to do it. If it's sending emails automatically throughout, orchestrate, if it's triggering guides, and everything that we can basically do instead of a person spending time in doing that. So very exciting future, and I'm sure that Emburse will speak next year about all of the new additions. And maybe before we kick it to your questions, I have some questions for you, team. So everything that you explained here is very mature, right? Complicated, and not everyone are at your stage. So kind of what would you recommend to people where to even start when thinking about this notion of being proactive, what they should have in place, if it's tools, processes? Would love your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I think maturity should not be think in terms of a tool or AI per se. It should be think in terms of the operational hygiene and rigor. So I think there are some core steps that should be taken care in terms of getting to that level of maturity. First of all, understanding what's a healthy customer for you. What does it look like? Who is that, right? So defining those attributes of a customer who you can coin as a healthy customer, right? And then you need to think in terms of the customer journey that your customers are taking, right? And then you have to make sure that you are capturing intelligence from that journey, from each point of that journey, right? That will allow you to be a bit more attentive and a bit more advanced in your understanding of your customers, right? Then what you need to do is you need to standardize before you automate. So you need to understand and define those actions that you're going to take once that intelligence is signaling you something. So you must comprise that standardized next steps. Yeah. And lastly, you need to complete your feedback loop. Whatever you then learn from the customer, like through your NPS or through your CES and other ways, you need to feed that back to your intelligence journey, and that's how you will kind of be in that continuous improvement state. So basically, the bottom line is maturity is not about a tool. It's really about your operational hygiene and making sure that is in place first.
Yeah, excellent. Sounds good. Maybe another thing kind of related. So let's say that I'm sitting in a C team of a company. When do you think is the right moment within the business, if it's size, type, that I should even care about being proactive, about implementing this type of technology in my org? What would be, do you think, kind of the timing? Or
yeah, I think it's earlier than they may realize. Okay. And I wouldn't say that it's a specific ARR metric or CSM count. You know, maybe it's when you're at 5 CSMs or $10 million in revenue, something like that. But it really is when the volume of work coming in and it becomes more than you can manage. And your CSMs and your teams are sitting more in support firefight mode, and your renewals are not predictable, and your revenue is not predictable. So for me, I think it's much earlier than many companies realize that having your eye on the predictability and the visibility of it has to happen much earlier.
Perfect. And maybe last thing for me. Let's say that we are sitting here next year, speaking about it. We started this journey not too long ago. What's your vision to next year? What's the link, what's the void that you want to implement this year?
I think as a CX leader, I would like to take these predictions and come up with something like a predictive forecasting. I know we all know that how important forecasting is for the business, but there has to be a way to kind of connect these predictions to the forecasting. That's one of my goals. The another one I would say would be is to automate. You know, we have been talking about automation a lot, but that automation doesn't need to be just, you know, random. That has to be human behavior based, right? We should be able to read these signals and then feed that into automation, define the guardrails, and, you know, have some very specific intentional automation rather than just random automation.
Yeah.
Lastly, I would say it's important that we are not only like feeding these signals and intelligence to the team who actually needs it, but also to the leadership where they need to take some, you know, business decisions about, for example, price sensitivity or like, you know, what is right for our customers. So that's where I'm going to be for sure.
Very interesting.
And I think from my perspective as a CSM leader, the CSM's work shouldn't radically change, right? But it should be more intentional, more proactive, and really able to know that we're meeting our customers before they have hit a point of friction. And then from a C-level perspective, you know, my goal is that my ELT members know what's coming and they have clear visibility on our accounts, on our renewals, and on our commercial revenue growth and goals.
Awesome, awesome. So thanks for the answers. Yeah. And now we're going to take some questions from the audience. I think we have a microphone that's floating somewhere here. We should have a microphone. So if you have questions, raise your hand, and we'll...
Got one down here.
We have questions here. Thank you.
Should I go first? Okay. Hi, guys. Good afternoon. Peter Lewandowski.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Just wondering, sorry, I'm like over here. I know you're looking around.
Wow.
No, all good. So obviously predictive is great for determining if a client is a churn risk, but do you ever have a strategy or use it at all to determine if a client's not a risk anymore and you can direct your resources elsewhere to maybe not focus on having to retain a client or anything, and because you've already done such a good job at retaining them? Do you ever, like, you know, use your analysis to drive the other way?
Yeah, I think, you know, I can, from my perspective, how we're looking at that is really making, I've said, instead of just a book of business, it's a book of attention. So it allows them to intervene when we do see there's a churn risk, or maybe it's, you know, we intervene or we interact with the customer in a different way when we don't feel that they're a churn risk. We're looking more for advocacy and them kind of promoting our products and our services within, because we do recognize that they're a happy, healthy customer.
Yeah, and churn is at the heart of a CX business, right, as you can imagine. But you brought up a good point that it's not just about churn, right? We should be able to trigger adoption play or upsell play, and that's what like we believe like we can do where there's, you know, low or no churn signal, because you may have customers who are at the edge of their usage, and you may want to go in there and, you know, like propose them to take more from you because and that's what the signal is giving you, that hint, right? So you're absolutely right. Churn is just a part of this whole signal mechanism. This is where adoption play and upsell play would be the next target if you see my point.
Yeah. And I will add that Predict is a multi-model platform, if you will. So we do see customers implementing one model for churn, getting all the playbooks needed for churn, but another model for a cross-sell, or for an upsell, or even for a downsell. So you have the ability to actually build your own AI engines that fits to your business and what you want to drive. And we see it a lot with Predict especially. So.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, actually, maybe that last point is a good segue, actually. I have a question about the inputs to the model you had shown earlier. I think there were 6 of them. Were those standard? Sorry, it's weird hearing myself. Were those standard ones prescribed by Predict, or was there some customization and you had to do for that?
I'll start with the health score because that's where it all began, and then how it matured with Predict, right? So with health score, we actually started looking at the primitive signals, like, for example, how many times they're logging in the system, or how much time they're spending on the app, what is their average time on the app trending as compared to the last 30 days, 90 days, and how many events they were doing in the product. The good thing about Pendo is, like, it provides all these things very readily at the visitor level, at the account level, right? So we started with this kind of basic model where we combined all these things to basically say that whether the customer was going to churn. For example, if there was an account that where the time on the app was trending 70% downwards, we know something was wrong with that, right? So we started with these kind of basic predictors, but then what Predict allowed us to do was to scale that up. Means Predict has the ability to connect to each and every signal in Pendo. So we have built models which are like something like 700 predictors, as compared to what we were building previously, like 15, 20 signals. So you can imagine like how much accurate or how much strong that becomes once you start to use the whole power of the usage data. I hope that answers.
Yeah. And I would love to add from like a technical perspective, the value of Predict really that it's based on deep learning. It means that we can ingest hundreds and sometimes thousands of attributes from obviously Pendo usage data, which is everything instead of only 10, 15, 20, or even 30, right? And we can combine it with signals from the CRM, marketing, support, data warehouse, so you get an image that's full instead of just trying to pick and choose and be very biased to what you think that drives the needle. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. I think in the maturity model, you talked a little bit about the first step being identifying what healthy or good looks like for your customer base. I was wondering your thoughts on potentially using Predict to actually determine what those healthy factors actually look like. So flipping it and using the model to kind of help you identify what healthy customers are.
Absolutely. You want to go?
Yeah, I think, the way that we looked at what healthy was we did a little bit of a combo. What I was finding is that my CSMs, as we were doing our projections and our plannings, were calling it based on gut feel. And sometimes their gut feel may be a little off, or they may be nervous to call a customer yellow or red. And so while we were building our model, we would run the system inputs that were coming from Pendo against my team's gut check and seeing where there were differences and using that internally as a talk point to understand, well, if Pendo is signaling healthy and good, but the CSM is signaling red, what exists outside of Pendo that we may not be able to see in a dashboard? So that was one of the first things we did to get that model tuned in a way. Vikas, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's great points that you added, Kelly. So also like you can build these dashboards and these signals very easily in Pendo. You can combine your NPS, your CES, your PES all together in one place and give it in the hands of people to really understand the usage as well as automate, like we have been talking about here. So it really becomes easy for us to determine, like system usage is great, but they are still red. That means like there's something which is outside, they still need the system, but it's just that they're not happy about like some billing, for example, or something else, right? So you can then segregate these issues and target them one by one.
Hi there. Thanks for your insights. My question is about, we got a demo of Predict as well. Do you let all your customer success managers in there as well to see it? What's their workflow look like?
So we have, first step is to build those models, right? This is where you require the business knowledge and understanding, and sometimes it can get tricky because some of the signals may really be hacking your models, because if there is a post-fact data that may hack your signal and say, if this is true, then this is a churn. You need to be careful with that, building that while building that model. But coming back to your question, the CSMs, and I'm also including the renewal managers and sales people, we are trying to keep everything at one place. So what we are doing with the help of Predict is, we are taking those predictions and sending them to Salesforce, our CRM. So in our CRM, that's where the prediction exists, all the account information exists, and all the health score exists. Now I have a unified view where these stakeholders, these users can come in, and they don't need to go anywhere else, right? And they can take those decisions right away from there. So to answer your question, the workflow is, we take these predictions, build the model, take these predictions, put them in Salesforce, combine all that information, and then give it to the CSMs to use it. Anything to add?
Perfect.
I have a question. Sure. So the evolution does absolutely seem to be moving from data as insights, data as workflow, into automation there. You've talked a little bit about that, but is there a future, a roadmap? Where do you see automation going, especially in your digital segment where you don't have humans?
Yeah, I think the key part is there is still a scope on how to do this orchestration and how to do that in an effective and intelligent way and on an automated way. So while we have reached to a point where we have been able to generate the intelligence, where we have been able to send it to Salesforce and have the users use it, but that's still not sufficient, right? You should be able to do all this thing in an automated way. So to answer your question, we would ideally like to generate the health scores, predictions all automatically, feed it to the relevant systems, and I just talked about CRM. This could be your support system, this could be your Slack, this could be Predict, allow all those kind of integration, which is fabulous. And then we should be able to then configure some automated workflows in your CRM based off those insights. Like for example, if it needs to trigger a save play, then it needs to read that signal and guide the CSMs or generate an escalation case, for example, all by itself. So we are at I would say a middle stage right now, but the goal is to make it fully automated using orchestration and workflows.
Hi. Just two questions, if I may. One is, I know you said you're using a deep learning model. Is that trained only on one subscription, or is it crowdsourced across the whole Pendo community? And then the second would be about this use case. How are you all measuring success?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. Can you raise your hand? I don't see you
Yeah,
with the microphone. It's
Over
like
here.
super weird here.
Oh, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Good question. So we train only on your business data. It can be one sub, one app, 2 subs, 2 ups. It really varies around what you want to get into it. But every company and every data set is a world on its own. So you don't have any reason to connect the dots. What we want to do, and the reason that we do use deep learning, is that we want to take the data and the business objective that we define while building the model, and we want to look back in history and understand the different scenarios that led to churn, and those are probably millions or tens of millions of different scenarios that the model takes into a place. So this is answer number 1. And you said the second question was on the actions?
Measurement.
The measurement? Yeah. So we have basically, at least internally in the product, 2 ways that we measure it. So number 1 is accuracy, meaning how many of the predictions that we recommend are a reality. And the model, like predict, runs usually once a day, meaning it's doing its checks and balances based on new data and based on outcomes that it sees in real time, and then it trains itself. That's 1. Second, we have another leading indicator. So every time that the CSM sees a risk, we kind of require them to qualify that the risk is true. And we will see more and more in the product and in the UI on top of CRMs that we now create that will actually be able to kind of let people provide this feedback, so it also fine-tune the model before we even get to the result.
And we are also planning to measure it through, there are 2 ways you can measure it, right? One, from a system perspective, means you are measuring what impact it is triggering to the user behavior, means what are they doing after they see that prediction, so you can measure that. Or you can tie that to a business goal, like for example, how did the health of my customers change after I implemented predict? Or how did the upsell happen after I implemented predict? So you need a way to kind of like do a before-after kind of a synthesis where you are looking at the data before. This is my average health of all my customers in this domain. What is my impact after I implemented predict? So that's a great question about measurement, but there are some ideas how you can measure it.
Hi. Oh, sorry, that was really loud. I'm over here.
Over here. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for being here. I was asking or thinking about how you're using all this data you've gathered to also help transition with your onboarding and using that to get ahead of any risk signals that a customer could have, and then even further to their sales journey of how you're talking to them on what is the best package for them, and again, moving to that onboarding. Would love to hear what you've been doing with that.
You want to go forward? Okay. So with onboarding, I think this is part of the customer journey, right? So you brought up a good point. Like, we are focused on renewals. We are focused on post-sales and like how we make sure that we being a SaaS company, like how do we bring those customers back and upsell and cross-sell and all that. With the onboarding, you're right that probably this could be another model. With Predict, we can easily do that. You take all the signals like what's your onboarding time, how much time you're spending in doing that, or how long does it take for you to start the implementation after a customer is onboarded, what's your sales to professional services handover time, for example. You can take all that and feed it into a model and build a model that can tell you whether it could be a Boolean model, it could be like a specific model towards reducing that time of onboarding. You can build, the sky is the limit. You can, as long as you have the data, you can build a model to predict that. So we haven't gone that path yet, but that's a great idea. I'm going to think about it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's similar to where I was sharing our CSMs were doing the health score gut check. It's going to be similar within professional services, that calling a project, when I led professional services previously, calling a project red, yellow, green, right? There's sometimes the human element is sensitive to saying something is a problem. So I do think that's an interesting use case that would help us surface some of those at-risk engagements for onboarding.
Yeah, we actually have a customer that's doing something similar. They have a go live score, meaning it takes them a few months to get live with the customer after they signed, and they built a model that actually predicts on go live, because when a customer go live, they have data in the backend that can indicate if they are live or not, and there are actions that the services team need to do, the account team needs to do. So they actually built a model, but instead of churn, they try to predict if go live is green or not. So there's another capability that you can think of there. Yeah.
Hi. Earlier, I know you said that Pendo really helped with your data silos. How exactly is Pendo integrating with your siloed data? So like, for example, you mentioned earlier pricing sensitivity. How is it integrating with anything that's not NPS or Salesforce?
I think that's the beauty of Predict. It is a connector-based integration, so you don't need to really, it's like it happens in seconds almost, right? I mean, you just need to provide your integration key and that's it. So to answer your question, it is able to connect to CRM, it is able to connect to Slack, it is able to connect to your support system seamlessly. So that's how we are able to bring all these data points together into building that model almost instantaneously. So it's not where you have to use the APIs to define your integration points and all that. It is really a connector which is out of the box. You can use it to build that integration very easily.
Yeah, we're seeing two cases like on pricing and contracts and all of that. One case is that this data is already integrated to Salesforce, to a custom object or to some attributes within specific existing objects, or we can connect to a data warehouse that sometimes the data is kind of pushed to the data warehouse. So multiple ways to think about integration, but as Vikas said, we are kind of seamless to where the data sits. As long as it's tabular data, we can ingest it, essentially.
I think maybe we have time for one more.
Hi. When it comes, oh God, you sound weird. Sorry. Does Predict have a reporting framework? So you can say this customer was at risk of churning, it entered this playbook, got these emails, these guides, and now they've moved out of at risk to a healthy customer, or vice versa, even deeper to the at-risk side.
Yeah, you want to take it?
Yeah, I can take it. So we have a full reporting mechanism to Predict that runs every day with the predictions, the actions, and everything in between. Some customers, like you guys, when you sync the data back to Salesforce, you can also see almost exactly in your own reporting tools. Some folks integrated back to the data warehouse so they can have even more details. So we have all the data. You can sync it back to whatever you want the data to be activated. And also you can even slice and dice even more deep on like a BI tool if it's connected to a data warehouse.
And you can also integrate that back to Pendo and build dashboard there.
Correct.
So we have done that as well.
Correct.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you.